Just to begin, you sang in a church choir as a young girl. How much was this responsible for you wanting a career in music in later life?
I think because my father was a minister, I had my first experience with my family when I was about two singing in church. So it really, it was just so early in life that by the time I was in the choir, I had years behind me. I think that the influence of church music did have a lot to do with me continuing to sing.
Mm.
And as soon as I had an opportunity to, jump away from the church and do some other stuff, I wanted to just, like now, I just wanted to sing everywhere.
Who were the first singers to really inspire you to want to make it a career?
You mean other than my mom? Peggy Lee definitely was the most influential singer, of my life. I think there were other people like Sam Cooke and Ella Fitzgerald, some pop singers, Patsy Cline. I love just singers of, all different styles. But Peggy Lee, I think, influenced me from the time I heard her when I was about 3 years old, and I just felt things in my little body, and the memory is so clear that the music had just went straight into my heart, and I knew then that I wanted that I wanted music to be my life.
I believe Peggy Lee was an influence not just for her music, but the way she conducted her career as well.
Well, yeah, absolutely, because Peggy sang so many different styles of music. Her body of work was so eclectic, and that's not something that I set out to do. But I just, maybe having her as a mentor, I would find myself, somewhere asking a record company to allow me to do a certain style of music, and they would say no, and in my mind and heart, I would remember that Peggy did whatever she wanted to do.
Mm.
And I loved that about her. I loved it as I was growing up, and I loved it after I moved to California and actually met her and was able to spend some time with her. I just found her to be an amazing woman. She really understood the power of subtlety and just, how to make the most of her situation and manipulate it, without anybody getting hurt.
Mm. So your parents were quite supportive in you seeking a career in music?
Well, I think that probably the first year they thought that I would come to my senses and go back to graduate school, but but I think after I'd had some success, they seemed to accept more than anything. I don't think it was so much encouragement. They wanted all the kids to do whatever made them happy. And when they saw that music really did make me happy, and I wasn't out of my mind, and rock and roll and crazy stuff, they were of course supportive.
You sang with your sister as the Coolidge Sisters in those very early days, and there's something always very special in the sound of siblings singing together. What kind of material were you doing back in those days?
Well, my sisters are Priscilla and Linda, and we really were very young. I was, under 10 years old. Maybe I was 8. They were like 8, 11, and 12. And we just kind of sang church music, but we also did kind of pop tunes. We would play talent shows around Nashville and just sing for people. And we just did things, kind of standard songs at that time. I guess they've become standard now, but, when the Red Robin comes, Bob, 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 and we still do from time to time if it's requested by our father. It's pretty funny now.
Yeah. The time you spent working as a backing vocalist for other artists, is there anything you learnt and from the band leaders that you were singing behind that you apply to your own career when you're fronting your own bands these days?
Well, I think the most important thing that I learned was that there's more to a band than the ability of the players. There has to be a strong bond of friendship. I think that we always come up to the level of excellence of the best, most accomplished musician in the band, but I think we also kind of strive to come up to the level of maybe spirituality of another member of the band, and just really recognize each other for the human beings that we are. And if there's a personality clash, I don't care how well somebody plays, it just doesn't work. But because the music speaks volumes about the dynamic of the band.
Tell us about working with Delaney and Bonnie. They produced some wonderful work together and probably never achieved the acclaim that they fully deserve.
Well, I'm certain that they had never achieved what they deserved. I remember being at a premiere of a movie back in the early '70s, and I think I was having a dance with Elton John. And when we were dancing, he said, "I just have to tell you that the music and the power of the California bands, like Leon Russell and especially Delaney and Bonnie," he said, "really are the reason I'm here." He said it really was the music that just drove me. And I think it did for a lot of musicians. That they might not have had their fame due to them at the time they were making the music, but I think it influenced musicians so very much. And it was some of the best fun ever.
Yeah.
Because we just sang from the time we would meet on the road. We would do our sound check and we'd do the gig, and then we'd go to somebody's room and play music till late at night. Get up the next day. If we were on a bus tour, we would be singing on the bus all day. I don't know how we held up, but we did. Nobody ever lost a voice back then. And again, it was just that camaraderie. There was no competition, and people were not, against each other. We were all in each other's corners, and it was a beautiful experience.
A real sense of community.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way that I felt that all of the group in LA behaved, and it just seemed that nobody was competing. Unfortunately, when Joe Cocker came up short a band, and he hired some of Delaney and Bonnie's members, including me, I think that it really made an impact and kind of cut some strings with Delaney and Bonnie and some musicians. They felt like they had totally been abandoned.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem at all to be a conflict. Because I did a lot of gigs with a lot of people. So I was surprised to find that it had the impact that it did on Delaney and Bonnie, just feeling like their band had been ripped off.
That's such a shame. The Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour gave the impression of being a tour conducted at a frenetic pace and maybe physically tiring for its participants. Was it that way?
Yeah, it was awful. When I maybe 2 weeks into that tour, because I had never experienced anything like that. I don't think anybody had. I mean, it really was so very much like a circus on the road, under the guise of music. And the music was there. But the characters, with Miss M and Leon as the ringmaster and all of these people. We had a dog on tour, and some people brought their kids, and it was unbelievable. And I think because I was, not too long having graduated from Florida State University, and I just hadn't been around that kind of lifestyle. And I felt like I got my rock and roll university on the Cocker tour for sure. But I came home, I was so skinny that everybody that saw me shoved a milkshake or a malted in my face and said, "Oh my God, you look Biafran. You're so thin." And I was. I was under 100 pounds, and I'm 5'7".
Gee.
It's so.
It's well documented that the Leon Russell song Delta Lady was written for you. Does that song still hold a particularly special place for you?
You know, all the songs that have been written for me absolutely do. I mean, I've always had the handle, thanks to Leon, Delta Lady, and you know, it follows me, and I'm sure that's probably be on the tombstone. Here lies the Delta Lady. First, we can hear her singing.
From your very first solo album, there's always been a magnificent diversity in the music styles you've covered. You're a difficult artist to pigeonhole for those who like to do that type of thing. Is that something you did set out to do, to diversify as much as possible?
Well, I didn't set out to do that, but to me, music is music, and you have, you know, the common thread of the singer and the style of the singer and the musicians, and to me, that doesn't make it that diverse. You know, from record to record, there was a lot of diversity. You know, when I sang jazz or when I did country, but primarily I feel like my recordings have been pretty much pop music, although they've charted in different places, in jazz, pop, and R&B, and all over the place. And yeah, I always loved it that people were not able to pigeonhole and categorize what I was doing.
Yeah. I know for many years people mistakenly categorised you as a country artist due to your years with Chris Christopherson. Was that a bugbear at the time?
Well, it was pretty early in my career, and I think I got past it. You know, I mean, there still are people, I guess, a little confused, and I think some of the confusion there is that the boundaries on styles of music have changed so much.
Mm.
I mean, the Everly Brothers were pop when I listened to them, and now they would definitely be country. So, you know, it's the way that those borders have shifted. But I loved singing country music with Chris, but after we stopped recording together, I never recorded country music. I was always leaning more towards rhythm and blues at that time, soul music. That's my favorite stuff.
I read another interview with you where you described your first album as a searching album. Prior to that album, did you have uncertainties about which direction you wanted to go?
I don't think I had any doubt about which direction I wanted to go. I think the searching might have been trying to find some players that didn't want to have their name on my record. You know, I mean, there were so many people whose albums I had participated in that by the time it came around for me to do my first record, and everybody wanted to be there to pay back the favor. You know, Stephen Stills being one of those people. And at one night in the studio, we were listening to a playback of a song, and of course Booker was in there, Booker T. Jones, and Stephen looked at me and he said, "You know, the real significance of this album is that two of the great genius musicians on the planet have come together during your record." And I said, "That's the impact of my record to you?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Don't come back tomorrow, okay?" So those kinds of things are, you know, happening around me. I just never could deal with the ego stuff. You know, we're there to do something together. It's not, you know, it's not about anybody, you know, becoming famous.
Mm.
I really feel, you know, I've never gotten this business or started playing music for the money. It's just been truly for the love of music. And it's probably why I'm still here.
Yeah. One area where you did find some success was performing ballads. Was there a defining moment when you found yourself in a real comfort zone with that type of material?
I've always loved ballads as far as a listener, because I think ballads really do, they resonate in another part of your heart. It's not a song that makes you want to get up and dance, and there's nothing wrong with that. But from the time I was a kid, when I would hear a song that touched my heart, and it made me, it spoke how I was feeling, and it would just, move me in my heart, and I would just, sometimes cry a little or just relate to it. Or, the first time I heard Sam Cooke sing "A Change Is Gonna Come," I can remember driving my car. It was a little Volkswagen that I had, and I was driving my car, and when that song came on the radio, I had to pull over. I had to stop driving and just cried like a baby. So music has always moved me, and I think ballads, realizing the power of a ballad, those were the songs that I always really looked deeply into. I really felt that I would have done nothing but record ballads, but record companies don't agree with that pacing.
Yeah.
They really say, oh, you got to have some up tempo and some mid tempo, and then you can have your ballads. So it was always just getting through the other stuff to get to the ballads.
Do you remember how your arrangement of Jackie Wilson's Higher and Higher came together?
Yeah, I was doing an album. David Anderley was my producer for the first 10 albums at A&M, and Booker had come in to do some co-producing, Booker T. Jones, and we were out at mine and Chris's house in Malibu, and we were just kind of running through some ideas. And I guess about a year before that, Booker had done some recording for Epic Records that had never been released. And my sister Priscilla was married to Booker, and Priscilla and I had sung on this particular arrangement of Higher and Higher, and I just loved it. And I said, Booker, whatever happened to the arrangement that you did it of Higher and Higher on Epic Records, and is it going to be released? And he said, well, not by me. I said, can we try it? And that's where it came from. He just hit that riff on the piano, and we were gone.
Is there anything specific that you look for in a song to make it one that you'd like to interpret?
Well, again, it's when the lyric and the music. This is something that Chris taught me a long time ago, and it's really a matter of, I think, the singer and how this is interpreted. But Chris would say the measure of a good song is to find a great lyric and have the music speak in the same voice that the lyric speaks in. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't necessarily have to sing a high note when you say high, but it has to have a feeling that's kind of a marriage between the music and the lyrics. And I think that's the measure of good songwriters. They really know how to do that. So I usually look for, maybe I look for that and see who wrote it. And, Peter Allen always came up with the goods.
You returned to jazz in recent years. Is that something you had a real yearning to do?
Forever.
Yeah.
And I think, Peggy had done her jazz and had kind of led me to some other jazz singers, but, Billie Holiday, I was a part of the Billie and Me production that we did at the Kennedy Center and all over the United States. I think that I love jazz because it seemed like smart music to me, and kind of more subtle, and I was always attracted to it, but I could never get a record company. Once I had signed with A&M, we did the pop record, and then we did another couple of pop records, and I said, is there any chance that I could do a jazz record, because I've met this piano player in New York, Barbara Carroll, and we have some ideas. And A&M said, well, you can record it, but that doesn't mean you can release it, because you need to kind of be on a steady path in pop music and have your direction established before you take another, go off into another direction. So Barbara and I recorded 9 sides in about 5 hours at A&M, and I thought it was just great stuff. But it didn't come out until the late 90s. It was a record called Out of the Blues. It was released in Japan. It was called The Good Old Days. And Barbara and I actually toured with it. And then 3-4 years ago, my management, knowing how much I wanted to do another jazz recording, when I signed with them, they had asked me what I wanted. I said I want to do a jazz record, a real jazz record. And so they finally secured that through King Records in Japan and Concord Records in the United States. And we partnered up and got it done, and it's one of my favorite recordings ever.
Wow. Actually, I was looking through your recent tour history on your website, and I noticed Japan is a regular stopover for you. So that is basically because of those jazz records.
Well, it was that and the fact that I won the Tokyo Music Festival. I think that had probably more impact. Overnight, I was just went from nobody to people chasing my car down the street and banging on the windows. It was a huge thing in Japan at that time. Everybody in the country watched it.
Yeah.
So it really did kind of set and hold a place for me in Japan. And my husband's Japanese. I have a Japanese family over there, and I just feel a great fondness for the Japanese.
So with such a long and diverse career to choose material from, what is the makeup of your live shows these days?
The live shows, a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I really do love to, because there are some songs that I am committed to play for audiences, because I know that, if somebody came to a show and I didn't do Higher and Higher, or We're All Alone, they would probably be disappointed, and I certainly don't want to do that.
Mm.
There's plenty of time in the show to make me happy and make everybody else happy, too. And honestly, when I look out and people are having so much fun hearing a song that I've been singing for all of my life, makes me happy.
Yeah.
I saw James Taylor about less than a year ago, and he was playing... he was about to sing You Got a Friend, and he said, little did I know back in the 70s when I recorded this next song that I would be singing it every night for the rest of my life. And I just totally understood.
Now, the Winter Olympics don't get a huge coverage down here in Australia, but I believe you're involved in a very special performance there.
Yes, I was. It was in Salt Lake City, and I performed with my sister and my niece, and I performed with Robbie Robertson. And our group is called Walele. It's a Native American group, and we were invited by Robbie to be part of the opening ceremonies, and it was unbelievably beautiful because we are Native American, we're Cherokee, and for us to be singing when there were 1,000 Native people out on the ice in full regalia, it was absolutely like being in heaven.
Mm. I want to talk more about Lila. That's with your sister and your niece, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about that outfit?
Well, that helps. You mean what we wear or what we do?
No, sorry, it's an Australian term about that group.
I know, I like it. Well, we're not recording or performing right now.
Yeah.
we just have other things going on. Going through a really rough time with my father is terminally ill, and we're not doing Wallela right now, but there's always a chance that we will do another CD. It was just a wonderful journey for us. We began, I think, in maybe '97 we did the first one, and we just sang songs about our people. Some of them were songs about the history of our people, and some were, that what we call urban Indians, people, that have moved on off the res and into society. It was really heartfelt music, and, it's like you said, there's nothing like the sound of family, because there's something that is so similar in the timbre of each of our voices because of our genetic makeup.
Mm-hmm.
So it really was. I mean, I really felt like when we were recording and when we toured and when we worked with Robbie Robertson, whether we were in this country or in Italy, or we did a lot of things with him, and it was just always, I just felt like I was a blessing.
Yeah. So after all these years, is there a specific project that you haven't done that is still on your wish list of things to do?
Well, there's one that I have been working on, and I'm kind of running into some contractual constituencies, as Al Green says. But I want to kind of go back and do a roots record of the music that influenced me from the time I went to Memphis and started working in the studios there, and on to LA and New York, and just a lot of it is soul music. Otis Redding was huge with me, and Al Green, my God, was my guy. I just love Al Green and Peebles. So that's something that's in the works.
Terrific. That sounds wonderful. So before I let you go, Rita, if you could go back in time and speak to young Rita Coolidge just starting out on her career in music, what advice would you be sure to give her?
Well, if she was starting out at the time that I did, I wouldn't need to give her any advice except to just persevere and follow the music, because you can't do anything else. And that's really even more so now, because the competition and the numbers of people out there that as we see on television with shows like American Idol and those music shows, the talent is unbelievably huge. So, just persevere and, always have a backup job and do it, because there's just no other way you can live your life. And God will bless you.
That's wonderful advice. Rita, thank you so much for being so generous with your time today. It's been a pleasure, absolute honour to speak with you.
Thank you, John. It's been great talking to you, too. My love to everybody out there in Radio Land.
Yeah, it's been about 10 years or so since we've had the pleasure of seeing you down here, so I hope it's not too much longer before you grace us with your presence. It'll be lovely to see you again.
I would love to come down.
Well,
Thank you, John.
We'll be here waiting for you. Thanks, Rita.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.